Jake Harrison exhaled a slow, steady breath as he stood atop the outer watchtower of Frontier 7, a remote Terran Confederacy outpost on the rugged planet known as Rima 4. The twin suns overhead, one a dull red orb, the other a blazing white sphere, bathed the horizon in an ever-shifting tapestry of light and heat. Rima 4 was an arid, merciless world of endless dunes and jagged rock formations, where violent sandstorms were common and water a precious commodity. Yet for all its hostility, Frontier 7 was far from abandoned. It existed for one reason alone: the extraction of proxy, a rare mineral essential to fueling the Confederacy's faster-than-light drives. Jake lifted his binoculars to scan the desert. The swirling haze of wind-blown sand made visibility poor, but he'd learned to adapt in his 2 years stationed here. He'd become attuned to the faintest signs of movement: shadows flickering along a dune crest, a glint of metal that might indicate the presence of the Zarl, the planet's indigenous warriors. The Zarl had raided the outpost multiple times, believing that the Terrans were desecrating their ancestral lands by mining poxy. And perhaps, Jake often mused, they weren't entirely wrong. Morality, however, wasn't his department. Security was. His duty remained the same: protect the facility, the team, and the precious cargo. He descended the tower ladder, every muscle in his arms taut from tension and the incessant desert wind. At the bottom, Lieutenant Commander Briggs was waiting, her face set in that familiar look of controlled exasperation. She was a strict officer who seldom tolerated any lapse in discipline, and Jake had learned to respect her relentless focus. "Everything quiet out there?" Briggs asked. "Too quiet," Jake replied, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Even inside the barrier walls, the heat found its way through. "No sign of Zarl activity, but that doesn't mean they're gone," Briggs nodded. "Keep an eye open, and by the way, we're about to receive a visitor from the Federation." Jake's eyebrows rose. "Federation? Did I hear that right?" Briggs gave a curt nod. "Ambassador Aola Vicon. Apparently, she's here to inspect the mining operation for compliance with interstellar standards. Could be politics, could be some other agenda we're not privy to. Either way, the Confederacy wants us to show cooperation. Make sure her arrival goes smoothly." Jake suppressed a groan. The Federation and the Terran Confederacy were nominally on amicable terms, but everyone knew the two factions competed fiercely for resources. He had to wonder if this so-called inspection had a deeper purpose. Nonetheless, his orders were clear. "Understood, ma'am. I'll make sure to greet the ambassador." "Good. Her shuttle's already in orbit. She'll be dropping down any minute now." Jake saluted and turned toward the main courtyard. Frontier 7 was a humble arrangement of prefabricated structures: living quarters, labs, hangars, armory, and various storage units for proxy. Thick walls of metal and polycrete ringed the settlement to keep out the worst of the storms and, in theory, discourage the Zarl from staging large-scale attacks. Past experience, however, had proven that the walls were only a partial deterrent. When the Federation shuttle descended through the dust-laden sky, its polished hull stood out starkly against the gloom of the desert. Jake could see the reflection of Rima 4's suns gleaming across its sleek plating. He waited at the landing pad as the vessel's thrusters blew a torrent of sand and grit in every direction. Within moments, the boarding ramp extended with a mechanical hiss. He straightened his spine, adopting the poised stance befitting a soldier greeting a diplomat. The first figure to appear was slim and tall, draped in a dark gray uniform with Federation insignias. Aola Vicon followed close behind, a figure Jake realized was not human. Her emerald green skin glistened in the sunlight, as if reflecting the brightness. Long silver hair cascaded over her shoulders, framing a regal face with high cheekbones and sharp, intelligent eyes. She moved with a calm grace that belied Rima 4's intense gravity, which many visiting off-girlers found debilitating. She paused at the foot of the ramp, scanning the surroundings before turning her gaze on Jake. He felt an odd tension in his chest, the reflexive awareness that this individual was alien in ways he couldn't fully articulate, and yet mesmerizing. He stepped forward, forcing himself to focus. "Ambassador Vicon, welcome to Frontier 7, he said. "I'm Staff Sergeant Jake Harrison, head of security." "Thank you, Sergeant Harrison," she replied, her voice carrying an undercurrent of melodic resonance. "I trust that we'll have your full cooperation during my visit?" "Of course," he answered, wondering if she intended the comment as a subtle test. "Allow me to show you around." She nodded. "Please do." Jake led her across the compound, describing its basic layout: the barracks, the command center, the labs. The heat pressed down on him like a tangible weight, and he noticed Aeola's expression shift, her brow creasing as though the climate affected her more than she wanted to admit. He offered her a rehydration canister, which she accepted gratefully. A faint dryness caught in his throat. He'd had no reason to worry about the usual trifles of social interaction, especially in a place this far from civilization, but there was something about Aeola Vicon that set him on edge. She was calm. Too calm, like someone who measured every second, every breath. He dismissed the notion, chalking it up to typical wariness. Diplomats and soldiers rarely shared the same worldview. They eventually arrived at the main storage facility where Proxy was kept prior to shipping. Jake was about to open the blast door when Aeola pressed a hand to her temple. He caught a glimpse of a sudden, flustered look in her blue eyes. "Ambassador, are you all right?" Her breathing grew shallow. Yes, I'm fine, just something." Jake felt a wave of concern. "Maybe the heat is worse than you realized. Let's step inside, it's cooler." She shook her head. "It's not the heat. There's a scent in the air." It was the first time he noticed that her eyes, though distinctly alien, seemed dilated as if in shock. Slowly, she drew in a deeper breath and her cheeks, an emerald shade, darkened slightly. She stared at him. He tensed. "Is something wrong?" Her voice dropped to a murmur. "Your pheromones. That must be it." Jake blinked, trying to parse her words. "My what?" She looked away as if embarrassed. "There's a chemical signature humans emit. Sweat, genetic markers. My species is known as the vixen. Our biology sometimes reacts unpredictably when we detect certain compounds." Her gaze lifted, meeting his eyes. "It seems I'm having that kind of reaction now. That kind of—" he started, then stopped as realization sank in. "Should I be concerned?" She exhaled shakily. "My mating cycle might be starting. It's not supposed to happen outside contact with a compatible vixen male, yet something about your pheromones is triggering it." Jake's heart hammered. He'd never heard anything like this in all his travels. "What can I do?" She pressed her lips tight. "I need to speak to my ship's medical team immediately. If I can access certain inhibitors, we might halt it." Then, with a tremor in her tone, she added, "If it isn't stopped, my body will continue changing, rapidly." Without hesitation, Jake led her to the outpost's communications center. Along the way, Aeola's breaths were coming quicker, and a fine sheen of perspiration glimmered on her temple. He was uncomfortably aware of the faint smell of sweat clinging to his own uniform, the dryness in the air intensifying every bodily odor. He wondered if that was precisely what had set her off. At the comm station, Aeola established a secure link to her Federation ship. Jake stood guard while she spoke in hushed, urgent tones with the medical officer. Despite straining his ears, he only caught fragments. No immediate flight possible. Solar interference. Possibly irreversible. Treatment delayed. After ending the call, Aeola turned to him, her expression troubled. "They can't land on Rema 4 for another 3 days due to the electromagnetic storm moving through this system. They do have suppressants, but it's not guaranteed to work without direct administration." Meanwhile, your condition is going to worsen?" Jake asked, forcing calm into his voice. She gave a small nod. "I fear so, but we can try some local measures. A special diet, reduced contact with your specific chemistry." Jake almost smiled bitterly. "That might be difficult. I'm the head of security. You'll probably be around me a lot." Her eyes fluttered closed for a second, as if wrestling with a wave of internal heat. "I'll find a way." she murmured. Jake escorted her to the living quarters and set her up in a guest suite. The entire route she seemed to step carefully, as though each move threatened to trigger another surge in her body. When they arrived, she locked the door behind her and told him she would remain in isolation for a while. He walked away with a heavy heart, aware that this was a crisis no one could have foreseen. Back outside, he found Briggs waiting with a stack of data slates. "Lieutenant Commander," he said in greeting. She arched an eyebrow at his uneasy tone. "Something on your mind, Sergeant?" He contemplated how much to divulge. "Ambassador Vikon is experiencing a medical issue related to our environment here. She'll be in her quarters for a while." Briggs looked skeptical. "Should I be worried about a diplomatic disaster?" Jake considered. "Could be nothing, but let's remain vigilant." She sighed. "We always are. I also just got word from the Perimeter Watch. The Zarl might be regrouping. Their scouts were spotted near the ridge again." Jake nodded, tension knotting in his chest. There was never a day of complete peace on Rima 4.Wu. "I'll coordinate with the patrol squads and make sure we're prepared." He left to do so, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Aola. What exactly was happening to her, and why was his body chemistry the catalyst? It was nearly midnight by Rima 4's uneven measure of day and night when a soft chime on Jake's comm unit startled him out of a half-doze. He'd fallen asleep at his desk in the security hub, notes and screens still glowing with data on Zarl activity. Rubbing his eyes, he answered the call. "Sergeant Harrison," Aola's voice said quietly. She sounded strained. "I'm sorry to disturb you. Could you come to my quarters?" Concern spiked. "Of course. Be right there." Moments later, he stood outside the guest suite. The doors slid open and he stepped into dim lighting. Aola was sitting on the edge of her bunk, a sheen of perspiration on her face, her emerald skin now more vibrant than before. He also noticed that her figure, already graceful, seemed fuller somehow, her curves more pronounced. It was subtle, but he picked up on it immediately. I can't stop these reactions," she said, taking a shaky breath. "My ship's medical officer says the natural progression of our mating cycle can be intense if triggered prematurely." Jake felt heat rise to his cheeks, uncertain how to respond. He'd faced raids, near-death encounters, and harsh frontier conditions, but this was a new kind of crisis altogether. "What do you need?" Her gaze flicked across his face, as though analyzing him. "They recommended limiting the stimuli that set me off. Your scent specifically." She tried to laugh, but it came out broken. "I guess that means you shouldn't stand too close." He took a step back, though concern still pulled him forward. "Let's see if the outpost's doctor can do anything. Maybe he can replicate some form of suppressor." Aola nodded, biting her lower lip. "I'm willing to try. The last thing I want is for this to spiral out of control. The older records of my species note that if a mating cycle is initiated and not resolved or medically halted, it can cause organ failure. The body overheats itself." Jake's stomach clenched. "That's not good." "No," she agreed softly. "I came here for an inspection, not to be undone by a freak biological incident." He activated his comm again. "Dr. Shamayes, I need you in guest quarters 3. Bring your portable med kit." A few minutes later, the door slid open again to admit Dr. Shamus, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and perpetually tired eyes. He scanned Aola and gave Jake a sideways glance. "I heard we have something interesting going on?" Jake answered in a measured tone, summarizing the basics of Aola's problem. Dr. Shamus listened intently, then ran a scanner over her body, watching the readout with professional detachment. He took notes, tapped at the device, and finally exhaled. "Your physiology is quite unique," he said to Aola. "In all my years, I've never dealt with a triggered mating cycle across different species. This scanner suggests rising hormone levels far above normal. Your core temperature is higher than a typical vixen baseline, though I'm basing that on the limited data your Federation provided." She pressed a hand against her heated cheek. "Can we synthesize an inhibitor? My people typically use a specialized compound, but I don't have any on me. I can try, Shamey said. I'll do what I can in the lab. But the odds of replicating it without the original formula are slim. Any progress could help, Jake cut in. We can't let her condition deteriorate. I understand, Shimmy said, stuffing his scanner back into his medkit. I'll start immediately. Ambassador, rest as much as you can and drink plenty of fluids. If you notice your heart rate or temperature spiking further, page me. When he left, the room fell quiet except for the hum of the cooling unit. Aola leaned back against the bunk, her eyes drifting shut. I never wanted to be this much of a burden, she murmured. You're not a burden, Jake replied. We'll find a solution. She offered a small, grateful smile, her features softened by vulnerability. Thank you. Despite every professional instinct warning him away, Jake felt a surge of protectiveness. He wanted to do more, standing there, close enough to see faint glowing patterns under her emerald skin. He sensed the electricity of her presence in the air. He realized that her crisis was intensifying something primal between them, something he wasn't prepared for. He excused himself before it could grow more awkward. Outside, he took a long breath of the desert night air. The dryness stung his lungs, but at least it cleared his mind. Aola's predicament wouldn't be solved by him losing his self-control. The next day dawned under a crimson sunrise, as Rima 4's red star rose first, painting the entire outpost in a surreal hue. Jake made his rounds, ensuring the perimeter defenses were locked down. Reports indicated that Zarl scouts had been sighted a few kilometers out, though no direct confrontation was imminent. That was small comfort. He swung by the lab to check on Dr. Shawnees. The doctor, bleary-eyed, looked up from a row of vials. I tried everything, he said in a hushed tone, mixed a few analog compounds with local reagents. None of them effectively mimic the Vixen's endocrine blockers. Jake grimaced. So, no luck? Not so far, but I'll keep trying. Time might be limited, though. If her system is this sensitive, we can't guarantee she has 3 full days before her body hits a critical point. Then keep me posted. I need to see if Aola's doing all right. Jake found the ambassador in her room, pacing with restless energy. She'd apparently showered, hair still damp, wearing a thin, short-sleeved outfit that left her arms and part of her legs exposed. He tried not to stare. The change in her physique was increasingly noticeable, as though her body kept subtly refining its shape to something more alluring. It was as fascinating as it was disconcerting. She paused when he entered, her breath hitching. You're carrying that scent again, he stiffened. I can try wearing a different uniform, or I can come back. No, she said, exhaling. I need an update. Please, just stand on the other side of the room. He complied, leaning against the wall. No progress on the inhibitor. Seamus is still experimenting. Her jaw tightened. I see. Silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the climate control. Aola pressed a hand to her temple as if steadying herself. I can sense it, Jake. My body is building up some reservoir of energy and it's craving something. Completion. Union. This is how a normal Vixen cycle works, but we never expected it to activate with a human. Jake swallowed. Is there anything else that might mitigate it? Some alternative? She released a humorless laugh. One alternative is letting the cycle run its course, which can last 2 weeks. But that's not feasible. I'd likely suffer permanent damage by day 10, if not sooner, because this is a cross-species trigger. Another alternative? Well, the natural resolution, but that would involve— Yeah, Jake said softly. You and I actually physically bonding. The tension in the air felt almost tangible. Aola turned away, arms folded as if hugging herself. It goes beyond just physical. A Vixen cycle is partially about genetics and compatibility. It's why I'm still in shock that your pheromones triggered me. Our species are not supposed to be genetically aligned. Jake felt his heart pounding. He was no stranger to biology, but hearing her calmly state the only real remedy was an intimate union made his mind swirl with conflicting emotions. He'd never considered himself xenophobic, but the idea of crossing that boundary was daunting in ways that training manuals never covered. At that moment, an alarm blared through the corridors. Jake tapped his comm. "Harrison here." Briggs's voice broke through the static. "Sergeant, the perimeter scouts have picked up Zarl movement near the eastern ridge. We need you suited up now." "On my way," he said, glancing at Aola. "Stay here. Lock the door. Don't let anyone in." She nodded, fear flickering in her eyes. "Be careful." He hurried to the armory, adrenaline spiking. The possibility of a Skarn incursion... No, wait, he corrected himself. The outpost database called them Zarl. The user's earlier narrative used the name Skarn, but it was basically the same indigenous group. He tried to keep his mind on the threat, but Aola's predicament tugged at him. He shoved those thoughts aside to focus on the immediate danger. The patrol outside the walls confirmed on the comm they'd spotted at least a dozen Zarls, possibly more, armed with projectile rifles. Jake quickly rallied a response team, distributed pulse weapons, and took up position along the defensive ramparts. Through the scope, he could see vague silhouettes moving amid the swirling dust. The Zarl never launched a full assault in broad daylight unless they were desperate. He braced for a potential standoff. The tension persisted for nearly an hour, but the Zarl eventually withdrew. Jake suspected it might be a reconnaissance in force, a test of Frontier 7's defenses. As soon as the perimeter watch reported the area clear, he climbed down to regroup with Briggs. She shook her head, exasperated. "They're testing us. Maybe next time they'll try a real push." Jake nodded. "We'll stay alert." He hurried back to Aola's quarters, concerned that the shock of an alarm or the stress might have worsened her condition. Inside, he found her pacing again, but this time a faint glow emanated from beneath her skin, swirling patterns of soft luminescence across her arms. He stiffened. "Aola, your skin." She glanced down, eyes widening. "That's new. It started about 15 minutes ago. Feels tingly, like energy is moving under the surface." He remembered how Dr. Shamish's notes mentioned that the vixen's physiology could adapt in ways humans barely understood. "Does it hurt?" She shook her head. "No, it just feels intense. My temperature's higher, though." In a burst of frustration, she sank onto the chair, burying her face in her hands. "I can't believe this is happening. I'm supposed to conduct an inspection, not succumb to some unstoppable mating drive." Jake approached, carefully stopping a few feet away. "We'll figure it out. I won't let you deal with this alone." She lifted her gaze, and for the first time he saw a fleeting shimmer of tears in her eyes. "Thank you." His chest tightened. Without thinking it through, he extended a hand. She hesitated, then accepted it, fingers trembling in his. A jolt of warmth passed between them. The glow on her skin brightened momentarily, and she inhaled sharply. He quickly let go, stepping back. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean..." She shook her head. "No, it's not your fault. My body is just unbelievably reactive." Then she managed a faint smile. "But it's better than feeling alone." Jake inhaled slowly, trying to keep his emotions steady. "Dr. Shamis has no fix yet, so we just have to keep you stable." In the following hours, he made arrangements to have her quarters cooled to a lower temperature, to see if that slowed her internal heat. He also had special nutrient packs delivered. Aola forced herself to consume them, though it did little to curb the rising tension in her body. Another day passed in this anxious waiting. Reports arrived that the Federation vessel was still stuck outside the planet's orbit, blocked by a massive electromagnetic storm. That meant no specialized Vixen medical team. Meanwhile, Aola's transformations continued. The swirling luminescence around her arms extended to her shoulders, and her once silver hair gained faint iridescent streaks. She confided to Jake that Vixen mating cycles usually required completion or a medically induced stasis to prevent dangerous side effects. Her heart rate soared, she was losing precious fluids through perspiration, and her mental clarity wavered at times. Yet she refused to let anyone but Jake or Shamis see her in such a state, for fear that Federation officials would declare her unfit for duty. Jake found himself torn. Part of him wanted to protect her, keep her safe because no one else could handle this. Another part of him grew increasingly aware of her allure, the intangible draw that made his pulse spike whenever he was near her. He knew it was partly chemical, maybe wholly so, but there was more to it. It was in the kindness that surfaced in her eyes when she thanked him for small mercies, in the steel determination that refused to let her predicament overshadow her sense of responsibility. He told himself it was just empathy for a fellow being in crisis. Yet late at night, in the silence of his own bunk, he recalled the way her skin glowed under his touch, the hush of her breath as she fought the pull of her biology. It left him restless, grappling with feelings he couldn't name. On the third day, the Federation delegation arrived. Captain Thala, a fellow vixen, led a contingent that stepped off a second shuttle with crisp efficiency. She was accompanied by 2 heavily armed escorts and a medical officer. While Aola stayed in her quarters, Jake and Briggs greeted Thala in the main courtyard. Her expression was severe, glancing around the outpost with barely veiled impatience. "I'm here for Ambassador Vikon," Thala said. "Where is she?" Briggs cleared her throat. "She's resting. There's been a complication with her health." Stella's eyes narrowed, then fixed on Jake. "My understanding is that you have knowledge of her condition, Sergeant?" Jake nodded stiffly. "Yes, she's been experiencing a triggered mating cycle. It's—" "I see," Thala said, her voice icy. "Take me to her at once." They led Thala to Aola's quarters, pausing only to let Jake inform Aola via comm that Thala was arriving. When the doors slid open, Thala's gaze fell on Aola's changed appearance, the glowing patterns, the faint shimmer in her hair, the heightened curvature of her figure. Jake saw surprise, then calculation in, "This is worse than we expected," Thala murmured. "Our ship has the medication she needs." Aola lifted her chin. "It's not guaranteed to work at this stage. My body might have advanced beyond the point of basic suppressors. Besides, I'm well enough to continue my inspection here." Thala's lips thinned. "You clearly can't function properly in this state. The Federation Council wants you returned for immediate medical evaluation. That's a direct order." Jake saw Aola's hands tighten on the armrests of her chair. "Captain, I have reason to believe the proxy in this region could be key to understanding my transformation. I'm forming an unusual reaction to it. If I leave now, we lose that chance to study it." "Ambassador," Thala said, controlling her temper, "your safety and well-being supersede any curiosity. This is an unprecedented medical crisis." Aola opened her mouth to protest, but Jake stepped forward. "With respect, Captain, Aola has the right to determine her own course. She doesn't appear to be in immediate danger of organ failure." Feller shot him a withering glare. "And who are you to speak on her behalf, Sergeant?" Jake felt a surge of defiance. "I'm the one who's been supporting her through this crisis, the one who sees what's really happening here." A tense silence crackled, broken only by Aola's ragged breathing. Finally, Thala turned to the medical officer at her side. "Scan the ambassador, see how much time we have." The Vixen medic approached, scanning Aola with advanced equipment. Her eyebrows shot up at the readings. "Captain, her system is integrating something. Some resonance with a local mineral signature. If we remove her from this environment too quickly, it could destabilize her. That might lead to catastrophic failure." Thala's displeasure was clear. "Then we'll contain her here until it's safe to move her. Gather all the data we can. But the Council will want her off this planet as soon as possible." Briggs, who had been observing quietly, finally spoke. "You're all welcome to stay, but we have an ongoing risk of Zarl attacks. Keep that in mind." The meeting ended with a fragile stalemate. Thala set up a temporary Federation base in the outpost's spare laboratory, monitoring Aola's condition, while Aola tried to continue her diplomatic tasks despite her growing physical changes. Whenever Thala demanded compliance, Aola pushed back, invoking her ambassadorial status and her right to interpret mission parameters. Jake hovered at Aola's side, managing security concerns, quietly helping her navigate the overwhelming new sensations. The glow on her skin had spread to her shoulders and lower abdomen. She told him the patterns corresponded to neural pathways in vixen biology, which facilitated the flow of bioenergies. The synergy with Proxy was so intense that it interfered with Thila's standard approach. Aola insisted that any abrupt separation from the planet might lead to permanent harm. Meanwhile, the Zarl threat looms. Scouts regularly probed the perimeter looking for weaknesses. Jake had squads on constant rotation. In a way, it was a blessing. It kept Thila from pressing too hard to extract Aola, because the region was unstable enough that the Federation might face open conflict if they forced a confrontation with the Terran base. Late that night, Jake found himself alone in the lab with Aola, reviewing the day's scans. The luminous patterns on her arms pulsed softly in the dim light. She stared at the holographic display of her cellular data. The results were astonishing. Her body was weaving in traces of Proxy at a molecular level, forging new bonds that a normal vixen biology would never attempt. "Jake," she said softly, "do you ever feel like you were meant to do something bigger, but you never knew what until it found you?" He studied her face, the regal lines tinged with fatigue yet shining with determination. "Sometimes." "Why?" "Because I think this is bigger than a freak mating cycle. The more I connect with the Proxy, the more I sense its potential. It's not just an energy resource, it's alive in its own way. Or, at least, semi-organic." She paused. "And it's reacting to me because you triggered something in me first." He swallowed. "That's a big claim," she nodded. "I know, but I feel it in my bones. My species has legends about the union of two distant lines forging a new path." She gave him a half-smile. "Humans and vixens, though? No one saw that coming." He looked down at the hologram of her biometrics, heart pounding. "You think this union you're talking about, it means the only way to stabilize you is if—" She reached out, her hand hovering near his but not touching. The warmth emanating from her skin was undeniable. "If we complete the cycle, yes. It's not just about physical intimacy, Jake. It's about a deep genetic interplay. My body is rewriting itself to harmonize with yours." Jake's throat went dry. "That's huge." A flush of color touched her cheeks, deeper emerald swirling under the glow. "It is, and I don't want to force you into anything, but if we don't do this, I might die. Or at best, remain in this limbo until an alternative is found, which is unlikely." He remembered Dr. Shamish's dire warnings. The way Yola's condition had escalated so rapidly, she had at most a day or two before irreversible damage began. What happens afterward if we do that? Then I change permanently. The cycle ends, but I remain bonded to you in some way, biologically. My species treats that bond as sacred." His heart hammered. He had no illusions about the seriousness of forming such a connection, especially with an alien who had her own culture, her own people. But he couldn't watch her die, and he couldn't ignore the pull he felt for her either. "I'd never consider it just a fling," he said quietly. "If we do this, it's—" Her eyes glistened. "I know." Some unspoken understanding passed between them. The moment felt suspended in time. Jake thought about the obstacles. Thila's insistence on taking Aola away, the uncertain reaction from the Terran Confederacy, the Zarl lurking outside the walls. Yet none of it mattered more than saving Aola's life. "All right," he murmured. "We should do it, but not as some last resort. I want it to be a choice we make together." A tremor ran through her at those words. She cupped his cheek, and the faint luminescence around her fingertips brushed his skin with warmth. "Thank you." They found a private space in the lab's adjoining chamber, sealing it from outside intrusion. Jake tried not to feel self-conscious about the hum of the air recyclers or the sterile surfaces around them. Aola's glow pulsed more vividly when he took her hands in his. Her breath quickened, and he felt an odd tingling across his own body, as though her rising energy was resonating with him too. What followed wasn't the ordinary progression of two individuals exploring attraction. Rather, it was as if Aola's body, now at the threshold of crisis, surged with a wave of pent-up power. The luminous patterns flared with each shared touch, and Jake felt a dizzying sensation of connection. Through half-lidded eyes, Aola whispered her species' ancient phrases, words he didn't understand but felt all the same. The swirling brightness under her skin seemed to sync with the pounding of his heart. He kept it gentle, respectful, mindful that her biology was delicate. Yet he couldn't deny the heady rush that accompanied every moment they drew closer. It was as if the planet itself pulsed through her, a synergy linking them with the proxylate soil. Their breathing became ragged, the air thick with a primal electricity. She guided his hands and he guided hers, both uncertain, both determined. The heat grew, not oppressive but transformative. At some point an invisible threshold was crossed. She let out a soft cry, and the glow around her skin erupted in swirling spirals, dancing patterns that stretched along her arms, her torso, her neck. Jake felt an answering surge in himself, a flash of awareness that made the hair on his arm stand on end, like an electric current traveling through him. For a fraction of a second, it felt as though their minds touched, not just their body. He saw glimpses of her world, her identity, her awe. Then it subsided into a radiant calm. When they finally stilled, Aola collapsed against him, trembling but alive. Her eyes glowed faintly, and the patterns on her skin slowly faded to a gentle shimmer. He held her carefully, heart still hammering, body slick with sweat. The dryness of Rima IV's air was a stark contrast to the liquid warmth of that moment. After some time she spoke, voice hoarse. You saved me." Jake brushed a hand over her silver hair, noticing new, brighter strands. "I think we saved each other." A peaceful hush enveloped them. Neither knew how many minutes passed before Aola stirred, a small, hopeful smile on her lips. "I feel stable." He nodded. "Yes, you look like you've cooled down a bit." He also sensed changes in himself. His perceptions felt subtly sharpened, his body tingling with leftover energy. A quiet sense of belonging settled in his chest, as if some intangible bond had formed between them. Their moment of calm was shattered by a series of concussive blasts that rocked the outpost, sending tremors through the walls. Jake shot to his feet, pulling on his half-unbuttoned uniform. That sounded like trouble. Aola, eyes widening, followed suit. They dashed into the corridor to find red emergency lights flashing. Briggs's voice crackled over the speakers. "All personnel, the Zarl are launching a major assault on the north wall. Security teams to your stations." Jake cursed under his breath. The Zarl chose the perfect time to strike when the outpost was at its most distracted. He and Aola hurried toward the central control room. Alarms wailed, and the clang of gunfire reverberated through the corridors. Thala and her Federation guards rushed by, weapons drawn. Jake led Aola to an elevated vantage point near the armory. Through reinforced windows they saw the swirl of sand as Zarl forces hammered at the perimeter. The outpost turrets fired back in sporadic bursts of energy beams, but the Zarl had some form of shield technology. The Terran soldiers were pinned, forced to retreat behind the battered walls. Dust and smoke filled the air, making it nearly impossible to see. Briggs's voice cut through the static on the comm. "Jake, we need you on the south rampart. They're hitting us from multiple sides." "I'm on my way," he replied, turning to Aola. "Stay here. It's safer." She shook her head, something fierce in her gaze. "I can't hide. I'm changed now. I might be able to help." He didn't argue further. If Aola had gained any heightened abilities from that final stage of her cycle, they might be crucial. They sprinted to the southern rampart, where a squad of Terran soldiers traded desperate fire with a group of Zarl. Aola dropped behind a barrier, scanning the chaos. Jake flinched as a stray projectile ricocheted off a nearby crate, sending sparks and fragments flying. Then Aola did something he'd never witnessed before. She pressed a hand to the ground, focusing intensely. The glow beneath her skin flared. A faint tremor passed through the rocky surface underfoot. The nearest chunk of proxy-laden rock shimmered in response as if commanded by her presence. Jake stared, astonished, as the Zarl's advanced shield flickered. It was as though an invisible force momentarily disrupted their technology. The Terran soldiers seized the opening and fired, forcing the Zarl to retreat. The alien attackers scrambled for cover, apparently disoriented. Jake's mind reeled. Had Aola just manipulated the Procy in the soil to jam the Zarl's systems? They fought on, corner to corner, repelling wave after wave. Aola used her newfound connection to disrupt the Zarl's equipment at critical moments, while Jake led squads in a methodical counterattack. Eventually, the Zarl broke off the assault. Retreat signals flared across the dunes, and one by one the Zarl withdrew, leaving behind scorched barricades and shattered weapons. By the time the last shot was fired, Frontier 7 was battered but still intact. Jake slumped against a twisted section of railing, heart thudding, lungs burning from the acrid smoke. Aola stood beside him, luminous patterns on her skin fading to a faint glimmer. She looked exhausted yet triumphant. Briggs found them, her helmet missing, short-cropped hair matted with sweat. "Harrison, Ambassador, you two pulled off a miracle. I don't know how you jammed their tech, but that gave us the edge we needed." Jake glanced at Aola. "It's a new capability." Briggs surveyed the battered walls. "We'll regroup. The Zarl might have more fights in them, but for now they're gone." As the sun rose again in the bleak Rima 4 sky, the outpost's personnel set about repairing the damage. Aola spent hours assisting the wounded. Thala for once seemed to hold her tongue, though her eyes glittered with suspicion and curiosity every time she looked at Aola. Perhaps the display of power made her reconsider forcibly dragging Aola onto the Federation ship. Perhaps she'd also realized that Aola's synergy with Proxy was too valuable an asset to lose. Jake couldn't avoid Thala forever, though. She cornered him in the corridor outside the lab while Aola was helping Dr. Shamis treat the injured. "I've read the scans," Thala said bluntly. "I know that you formed a bond with Ambassador Vikon." His spine tensed. She would have died otherwise. Thala's jaw clenched. "Do you have any idea the implications this has? For her, for you, for the Federation?" Jake folded his arms. "I'm not sure I care about the politics. She's alive, and that's what matters. You'll care once the Federation Council weighs in," Thala retorted. "But for now, it seems the Council has sent a new directive. They want Aola to remain here, to further investigate the Proxy phenomenon. The Terran Confederacy has apparently requested the same. What you did during that Zarl assault convinced them this mineral might have properties beyond standard FTL fuel." Jake felt relief. "So you're not taking her away?" "Not yet," Thala said. "But mark my words, Sergeant, the Federation will not ignore the influence you have on her." She turned and strode away, leaving him with a sense of foreboding mixed with tentative hope. In that moment, Aola emerged from the lab, noticing Thala's retreating figure. Jake relayed what happened. Aola's expression was thoughtful. "Then it's settled. For now, I stay." She paused, lifting her hand, observing the faint luminescent traces left along her skin. "But what exactly have I become, Jake? I can feel the Proxy in the very ground, the network it forms, like a pulse." He reached out, gently taking her hand. "Whatever you are, you're still Aola." Her lips curved into a soft smile. "And what about you? After that bond was formed, I sensed something different in you too." Jake had felt it himself. Subtle changes in perception, a heightened awareness. "I'm not sure yet, but I'm ready to see where it leads." They gazed at each other, standing amid the battered corridors of Frontier 7, with the desert wind still howling beyond the walls. In the days that followed, Aola's transformation stabilized, no longer a threat to her life. Proxy scanning revealed that her body had permanently integrated some of its properties, enabling her to manipulate the mineral's frequency in limited ways. Jake and Aola continued to work together, forging a new understanding of Rima 4's environment, pushing the boundaries of what the outpost's technology could accomplish when paired with Aola's evolving abilities. The Federation and the Terran Confederacy jointly agreed to let Aola remain on Rima 4 for extended research, albeit under close observation. That decision soothed immediate tensions but hinted at bigger political entanglements ahead. Captain Thala and her team stayed on, though now more as supervisors than wardens. Briggs likewise kept the outpost's defenses primed, anticipating future Zarl attempts, yet a cautious optimism filtered through Frontier 7. Perhaps Aola's powers could pave the way for new relations, or at least deter further violence. Each morning Jake woke to a sense of renewed purpose. He would check the perimeter, ensuring no signs of Zarl infiltration, then meet Aola in the lab to examine her latest data. She discovered new facets daily. Sometimes, she would rest her palm on raw chunks of proxy, causing them to emit patterns of light that seemed to match her heart rate. Other times, Jake would tentatively reach out, and they would both feel the subtle tingle in their skin. The bond was more than a fluke. Some deeper synergy that might ultimately reshape not just Aola's existence, but perhaps the future of interspecies understanding. One evening, after the day's hustle of repairs and research, the two of them stood atop the outpost's southwestern wall, watching Rema 4's twin suns dip below the horizon. Aola's silver hair glimmered in the half-light, and the swirling glow across her arms created an ethereal radiance. Her posture was relaxed, more at peace than he'd seen since her arrival. "Jake," she said softly, "I want to thank you for everything. Not just for saving my life, but for seeing me as more than just an alien diplomat gone wrong." He shook his head. "You're not a problem to solve. You're a person, and an extraordinary one." A gentle breeze stirred the desert sand below. Aola's blue eyes shone. "So, what comes next for us?" He exhaled, gazing at the sky where distant stars began to appear. "I suppose we figure it out as we go. The Federation might want to use your abilities for scientific gain. The Confederacy will want you to stay on good terms to maintain proxy supply. And the Zarl might never stop testing our defenses." She nodded. "We'll balance it all together. I can't promise it'll be easy. My people can be insistent, and so can yours." Jake caught her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. The faint luminescence sparked where their skin met. "We've already survived one crisis. Whatever else is coming, I'm with you." They stood in silence for a moment, the hush of the desert around them, the intangible bond pulsing like a second heartbeat. Aola leaned her head on his shoulder, and they watched night claim the sky, uncertain of the path ahead, but certain they would face it side by side. In the following weeks, both the Federation delegation and Terran command officials hammered out a series of agreements. Aola would remain stationed on Rima 4, leading a joint research team to explore Proxy's deeper properties. Captain Thala maintained a watchful presence, though she seemed less hostile than before. Maybe witnessing Aola's bond with Jake and the remarkable feats it enabled reshaped Thala's perspective as well. Jake continued his role as chief of security, though now he had more responsibilities tied to Aola's personal protection and research facilitation. The outpost routine included daily check-ins on Aola's vitals, scanning new samples of proxy, and charting the pockets of mineral across the landscape. Sometimes Zarl scouts ventured close, but since the last pitched battle, they hadn't mounted another large-scale attack. Rumor had it they were regrouping deeper in the desert, but whether it was for future aggression or a reluctant truce remained unclear. Aola also theorized that, given time, she might use her proxy attunement not just for defense but for negotiation, perhaps bridging a gap with the Zarl. If the Zarl revered certain energies of the planet, Aola's unique state might hold symbolic weight. The idea of forging a treaty that spared further bloodshed spurred her forward with renewed determination. Yet not all was resolved. The Federation Council kept sending directives for progress reports, pressing Aola for a timetable on how soon she could be cleared for off-world travel. Conflicting agendas simmered beneath the surface. Some Federation officials wanted to replicate Aola's transformation artificially, possibly bestowing it on other envoys or soldiers. Aola refused to share enough detail to make that possible, preserving her autonomy. Jake backed her fully, though he worried about the political fallout. "Are we heading toward a future where you become a subject of experimentation?" he asked her one night, anxiety lacing his voice. She set aside a data slate full of scanning results, turned, and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Not if I can help it. My bond with you is something the Federation can't replicate in a lab, and Proxy is more alive than they realize. It won't yield its secrets just for the sake of weaponization." He nodded, letting his tension ease. "Then we keep forging our own path. A path neither purely Terran nor purely Vixen, but a new kind of alliance, shaped by the strangeness of fate." Day by day, they built a life within Frontier 7's high walls. Jake leading security detail, Aola guiding the research. The swirling luminescence across her body became a familiar sight for the outpost personnel, who adapted to addressing her both with due respect and genuine curiosity. Dr. Seamus found himself collaborating with the Federation medic assigned to Thela. Together, they marveled at Aola's advanced genetic readings. Some adjustments had also occurred in Jake, minor shifts in his biomarkers, slight enhancements to reflex speed, even a subtle sensitivity to changes in electromagnetic fields. Nothing as dramatic as Aola's transformation, but enough to confirm that their bond was tangibly mutual. Amid these changes, they faced the daily rigors of Rima 4. Sandstorms howled. The twin suns scorched the outpost relentlessly. Spare parts for machinery had to be stretched. The Zarl threat loomed in the dust. Yet Frontier 7 endured, bolstered by the sense that a new era might be dawning. Aola's presence had changed the outpost's people, too, instilling a cautious optimism. If one unexpected bond could push the boundaries of biology, maybe other boundaries, like those between Terran, Federation, and even Zarl, could be bridged. Late one evening, after finalizing a joint research memo, Aola joined Jake on a short walk along the perimeter inside the walls. From there, they could see the swirling dust devils across the open desert. The stars arched overhead, and the night air was marginally cooler than daytime. She slipped an arm through his, leaning against him as they strolled. "Remember the day I arrived?" she asked, voice soft, reminiscent. He smiled. "Yeah. I was skeptical about a Federation ambassador popping in to check on us, and you seemed so composed and formal." She let out a gentle laugh. "Composed indeed, until I inhaled your pheromones. Then everything changed." "I still can't believe it," he murmured, shaking his head. "Of all the improbable events, that was never something I expected." Her fingers tightened around his arm. "Me neither. But look where it led us." They paused near the southwestern corner, where a small observation platform overlooked the dunes. Aola looked out at the faint silhouettes of rocky outcroppings. The luminous patterns on her arms flared gently, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. "I wonder if we'll ever fully understand what happened," she said. "Why our genetic codes matched in this bizarre cosmic coincidence." Jake brushed a hand lightly over hers, warm under the faint glow. "Sometimes I think maybe it wasn't random. Maybe the universe saw two people who needed each other." She turned her face toward him. "I like that explanation more than cold probability." They stood there in silence, letting the hush of the desert swirl around them. In a single decisive moment of acceptance, Aola leaned up and pressed her lips to his. This time, unlike the frantic desperation of their earlier union, it was gentle, sincere, a shared promise of everything that might come next. Forging alliances, unraveling the mysteries of Proces, and learning the depths of what it meant to be bound across species. A day later, the ephemeral calm was tested. The outpost sensors picked up renewed Zarl movement. A large cluster of life signs advanced within a few kilometers, though they didn't immediately launch an attack. Briggs ordered a defensive stance, readying the turrets and troops. To everyone's surprise, the Zarl did not open fire. Instead, a small group approached under a makeshift flag of truce, a scrap of white cloth waving on a pole. They halted 100 meters from the outpost gates, waiting. Curiosity rippled through Frontier 7. Rare. Rarely did the Zarls seek peaceful dialogue. Jake, Aola, Briggs, and Thela gathered at the main gate, taking prudent precautions. When the gate rolled open, a swirl of dust parted to reveal 3 Zarl figures in layered, sand-colored garb. Each had wide, dark eyes and elongated limbs that allowed them to move gracefully through the desert. Their leader stepped forward. Though no universal translator existed for the Zarl's language, Aola attempted something new. She placed a palm on the ground, channeling the faint hum of proxy beneath the surface. The luminous patterns on her arms flared. She let out a tentative hum that resonated in her chest. Jake watched in awe as the Zarl leader seemed to pause, tilting its head in recognition. It responded with a series of melodic warbles. They spent hours that day in cautious attempts to communicate. Aola relied on a combination of the proxy's resonance, the Zarl's gestures, and improvised symbols. The details were murky, but the Zarl seemed to sense Aola was in tune with Rima 4 in ways the Terrans weren't. Slowly, an understanding emerged. The Zarl might be willing to cease hostilities if the outpost scaled back certain mining operations or guaranteed respect for sacred ground. Nothing was settled that day, but the first spark of dialogue had been lit. That evening, Aola sank into a chair in the command center, exhaustion lining her features, but the glow in her eyes was hopeful. "They want to speak again tomorrow." Briggs looked suitably impressed. "Never thought I'd see the day. If we can settle our differences without more bloodshed, that's a victory for everyone." Thela, arms folded, examined Aola with grudging respect. "Your transformation seems to have given you an edge in bridging these gaps." Aola gave a weary smile. "It's not just me. It's all of us, choosing not to shoot the moment we see them." But Jake knew she was being modest. Without her synergy, no conversation would have started. He placed a hand on her shoulder, letting the subtle warmth of their bond convey his pride. The next day brought further dialogues, halting and slow, but steadily moving toward an arrangement. The possibility of peace with the Zarl grew with each passing hour. Meanwhile, Aola and Jake found their roles expanding beyond mere ambassadors or soldiers. They became the living symbols of cooperation, a testament to what could be gained by transcending boundaries. One crisp dawn, Aola stood by the gates, preparing to greet the Zarl delegation. Jake was at her side in full security gear. She wore an adapted outfit that displayed her glowing patterns more openly, a conscious decision to signal her transformed status to the Zarl. As the gates rolled open and the desert wind swept in, Aola glanced at Jake. "Whatever happens today, thank you," she said quietly, "for believing in me, for trusting me, even when it meant crossing lines you never expected." He gently squeezed her hand. "I wouldn't change a thing." A swirl of dust separated, revealing the Zarl delegation. Aola stepped forward, luminous patterns shifting in a soft rhythm. Jake followed, heart thumping, uncertain how negotiations would end, but certain they were on the cusp of something far bigger than either of them had imagined the day Aola first inhaled his pheromones. Their story had become a testament to unexpected connections. Alien and human, soldier and diplomat, resource and environment, all woven together in a tapestry shaped by mutual respect and the startling power of adaptation. Perhaps Rima 4 would one day be known not just for its harsh deserts and proxy mines, but for the unity forged there. Or perhaps new challenges would arise, as they always did on the frontier. Whatever came, Jake and Aola had found both purpose and partnership in one another. Each sunrise brought a fresh horizon of possibilities, shining through the dust like promise made visible. A promise that the bonds formed between two souls, even across species, could spark profound change in a universe that often seemed too vast and divided for hope.